The skies above Valera IX glowed with fire as the night was torn apart by the invasion. From orbit, streaks of crimson lit up the atmosphere, the silent trails of burning ships as they fell from the void. On the surface, cities trembled under the thunder of bombardments, each impact shaking the towers of the capital. For the people of Valera, this was not war, it was extermination. The Kier Dominion had come swiftly and without mercy. Their fleets were a tide of metal and fire, overwhelming every defense the Valerans had mustered. Outposts crumbled. Orbital stations went dark one by one, silenced by precise blasts of plasma. For the Council of Valera, once proud members of the Galactic Assembly, all that remained was a decision born of desperation. In the council chamber, light from the flames outside spilled through the high windows. The chamber, once a place of debate and ceremony, now buzzed with panic. Councilors shouted over one another, their voices cracked with fear. "They are cutting us off from every escape corridor," cried Councillor Curring, his hands trembling as he projected a map of the system. Bright red indicators showed the encirclement, the Dominion's grip tightening. "Our fleets are gone. Our colonies cannot reach us. There will be no reinforcements." Others whispered among themselves, fearful but unwilling to accept the truth. Only High Chancellor Saravel stood calm at the central podium, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. She had seen what others would not admit. The Kier were not simply conquering, they were cleansing. Valera IX was to be erased. "We have one option left," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "We must activate the Deathworld signal." The chamber fell into silence. The words carried weight far beyond the technical. Every councillor knew what it meant. The Deathworlders, the civilizations born on planets so hostile that survival itself was an act of defiance. Worlds where storms never ceased, where predators evolved sharper teeth with every generation, and where nature itself seemed intent on destruction. Those species had been catalogued long ago, placed in archives under warnings. Dangerous, unstable, unfit for peaceful contact. Councillor Marat, the oldest among them, was first to respond. "The archives are clear. The Deathworlders are not to be summoned. They are unpredictable. They are to be feared." "And what would you have us do, Marat?" Saravel asked quietly. "Wait here to be vaporized? Surrender to those who do not take prisoners. The Dominion will not accept submission. They will burn Valera to ash." The old councillor faltered, unable to meet her gaze. Across the chamber, Curring whispered, "Legends say the Deathworlders broke entire sectors with their wars, that they left nothing but ruins behind them. If we call them, we may survive today, but we may unleash something worse tomorrow." "Tomorrow does not exist if we do nothing," Saravel said. "We call, we pray they listen." The council voted in silence. No one wished to press the command, yet no one could deny it was their only chance. By majority, the measure passed. In the depths of the capital's defense complex, technicians activated the beacon. A coded signal pulsed into the void, one designed long ago but never thought to be used. It carried a single message across the dark. "Valera IX requests aid. Deathworld-class civilizations respond." The beacon burned brightly, casting its desperate plea across hyperspace lanes, through relay buoys, and into the farthest corners of the galaxy. Above the planet, the battle raged on. Valera's last defense fleet fell, its proud cruisers torn apart under Kier guns. Refugee convoys tried to flee but were intercepted, their transmissions filled with the screams of the doomed. The Dominion pressed closer, confident their conquest was assured. On the surface, citizens gathered in shelters, listening to emergency broadcasts. The phrase was repeated over and over. "The Deathworld signal has been sent. Aid may come, hold fast." But no one truly believed help would arrive. The archives were clear. No one called upon Deathworlders and expected mercy. Yet hope lingered, fragile as glass. The beacon had gone out. Perhaps somewhere in some corner of the galaxy, someone had heard it. In the council chamber, Saravel stood by the windows, watching the heavens burn. Her voice was almost a whisper. "We have done all we can. The rest is no longer in our hands." And far beyond the reach of Valera's sight, in the cold emptiness between the stars, something stirred. The beacon had found ears willing to listen. The Deathworlders had heard the call. The night passed under the glow of firestorms that lit the horizon. By morning, Valera IX no longer looked like the shining capital of a prosperous world. Smoke rose from shattered districts, and columns of refugees streamed toward the inner shelters, carrying what little they could. The once orderly streets had become chaotic paths of survival, filled with fear. In the council chamber, the atmosphere was no better. The leaders had convened again, though few could focus on the discussions. Exhaustion lined their faces, and the constant rumble of distant bombardments shook the walls as though the planet itself shared their dread. Councillor Curran reviewed the latest reports, though his voice broke as he read them aloud. The southern hemisphere is lost. Entire districts have been burned, casualties too many to number. He lowered his eyes, his words faltering. Evacuation efforts failed. The Dominion has patrol wings intercepting every launch. They are not just conquering, murmured Marat, the elder statesman. They are hunting. They leave no chance for surrender. No one argued. The Kier Dominion's reputation was already known, a civilization that grew by erasure. They did not enslave, they did not negotiate. They consumed until nothing of the former world remained. Velera IX was now their prey, and the prey had nowhere left to flee. Yet among the despair, whispers had begun to spread. Refugees in shelters repeated them in hushed tones. Soldiers on the front lines heard them between exchanges of fire. Even the councillors could not ignore the stories growing among their people. "The Deathworlders will come," said Councillor Leorin, his voice carrying more hope than conviction. "The signal is ancient, but they must have heard it." Marat shook his head, his features shadowed by memory. "Do you not recall the archives? The Deathworlders are not saviors, they are destroyers. There are records, legends of what happens when they fight. Stars left barren, entire sectors reduced to silence." "They are still our only chance," Saravel said firmly. "If they come, and they bring ruin with them, it will still be more than the silence the Dominion offers us." The chamber quieted. Few wanted to admit it aloud, but the Chancellor's words rang true. Between certain extinction and uncertain salvation, even ruin seemed merciful. Above Velera, the Dominion tightened its grip. Their fleets drifted like black knives in the void, methodically sweeping away any resistance. Velera's defense stations, once symbols of strength, now floated as broken husks. The Dominion's commanders broadcast messages onto public channels, their harsh tones translated into dozens of languages. "Surrender is irrelevant. There will be no negotiations. Your world belongs to the Dominion." The people listened, despair weighing heavily on them. Yet as the days dragged into one another, a new sign appeared. Deep in the system, far beyond the planetary orbit, the first anomalies were detected. At the central defense hub, technicians gasped as the readings came through. Massive hyperspace distortions rippled across the void, far larger than any Dominion fleet movement. Energy signatures grew in number until they filled the monitoring screens. The system trembled under the scale of it. "What is it?" one officer asked in disbelief. "Multiple fleet-scale jumps," another whispered. "Not Dominion, something else." The council received the reports minutes later. In the chamber, the air grew heavy. "It could be them," Leorin said, his eyes wide. "The Deathworlders have heard us." Marat's hands shook as he leaned on the table. "If it is them, then the old warnings will come true. Velera may be saved, or we may unleash something we cannot control." The debate raged. Some councillors shouted for hope, others for caution. But all knew the truth. The signal had been answered. Something was coming. In orbit, Dominion ships shifted nervously. Even the conquerors seemed uncertain as they detected the scale of the arriving fleets. Reports filtered in among their own ranks, dozens, then hundreds, then thousands of signatures, each one massive. Far too massive for any known power. The refugees in the shelters heard the rumors first. The people whispered to one another, voices trembling with awe. "They have come, the Deathworlders are here." On the planet's surface, Saravel stood once more by the high chamber windows, gazing toward the dark sky. She could not see them yet, but she felt it. Something vast was moving in the heavens, a force the galaxy had forgotten, now returned at Velera's call. The Kier Dominion had promised total conquest. But as the first shadows of Dreadnoughts emerged from hyperspace, the balance of fear began to shift. For the first time since the war began, the Velerans dared to breathe hope. The void at the edge of the Velera system rippled like water disturbed by unseen hands. A moment later, reality split open. Massive shapes forced their way through hyperspace, their bulk dragging light itself into strange bends around their hulls. At first there were a dozen, then 100, and then too many to count. The Veleran defense technicians stood frozen before their displays, their monitors filled with blue-white icons, each representing a colossal warship. The scale was unlike anything in the archives. These ships dwarfed Valera's proudest battleships. They were titans, city-sized constructs plated in armor that glowed faintly with shield harmonics. In the council chamber, the first transmissions were played on the holoprojector. The image was grainy at first, distorted by the sheer power of the arrivals, but slowly the truth became clear. These were dreadnoughts, not a few, not a fleet, a storm of them spreading across the system with impossible coordination. "It cannot be real," whispered Councillor Curran, his eyes wide. "No civilization has this many dreadnoughts. No one builds them in such numbers." Yet the proof was in front of them. Row upon row of dark silhouettes lined the void, their hulls marked with a single symbol, a circle crossed by 3 lines, simple but commanding, the emblem of a civilization none in Valera had seen before. The Kier Dominion reacted swiftly. Their fleet commanders ordered an immediate attack, confident in their numbers. The first wave of Dominion cruisers broke formation and accelerated toward the newcomers, their plasma cannons igniting in a blaze of green fire. The void lit up with streaks of destructive energy. The dreadnoughts did not answer at first. They did not even maneuver. They stood in silence, letting the storm crash against their shields. The Dominion's firepower, enough to obliterate whole cities in moments, splashed harmlessly against barriers that shimmered faintly before fading back into nothing. Then the Deathworlders answered. From the lead dreadnought, a salvo of kinetic rounds launched with blinding speed. The projectiles were nothing more than metal rods accelerated to impossible velocity, yet when they struck, entire Dominion cruisers disintegrated in silence, ripped apart as though made of glass. Rail strikes cut through the formation, each shot ending a ship instantly. The Velarans watched in stunned silence as the battle unfolded. Dominion vessels poured their fire into the Deathworld fleet, but the dreadnoughts advanced steadily, unshaken, their return fire devastating. They moved with precision, their formations unbroken, their volleys timed to strike like the rhythm of a war drum. One counselor whispered what all were thinking. "This is not a battle, it is execution." Within minutes, half the Dominion assault force was gone. Their ships burned like falling stars, tumbling toward the system's gas giant, leaving trails of wreckage. Those that tried to flee found their escape routes cut off by fresh arrivals. More dreadnoughts emerged from hyperspace, surrounding the system like an iron cage. The Velarans struggled to understand. Who were these beings? Why had they remained hidden for so long, only to arrive now in such overwhelming force? Even the archives, filled with centuries of careful records, carried only fragments of rumor. Humans, a name spoken in half-forgotten histories. Exiles from some distant cradle world called Earth. Thought lost to time, erased by wars of their own making. And yet here they were, in numbers too vast to comprehend, wielding power that defied belief. On the surface, the people gathered outside shelters despite the danger, gazing upward at the streaks of light in the sky. The Dominion's fire still fell, but the people's attention was fixed on the heavens. They saw the meteors of burning Kier ships, and they dared to hope. For the first time in living memory, the invincible Dominion bled. In the command chamber of the lead dreadnought, unseen by Velaran eyes, humanity's fleet marshals exchanged clipped words. They spoke not of conquest, but of duty. They had heard the call, and they had answered as they always would. Back in the council chamber, Chancellor Saravel gripped the edge of the table, her gaze locked on the sight of Dominion fleets shattering like glass. Her voice trembled with awe, but it carried across the silence of the room. "The Deathworlders," she said softly, "the humans have come." The words spread quickly through the capital, whispered like a prayer. The galaxy's warnings had been true. Humanity was dangerous. Humanity was relentless. Humanity had returned. The Valera system trembled under the unrelenting weight of war. The Kier Dominion, once the unquestioned terror of this sector, now faced a foe unlike any they had ever known. Their fleet formations, precise and calculated, shattered under the coordinated assault of the Deathworlders. The sky above Valera IX, once choked with smoke and fire from the Dominion's bombardments, now glittered with the deadly ballet of human dreadnoughts. The first clash was catastrophic. Kier ships charged forward, plasma cannons flaring in deadly arcs, intent on breaking the line of the newcomers. The humans did not retreat. Instead, they held their ground with unshakable precision. Shield harmonics glowed, bending the onslaught of energy and scattering the waves harmlessly into space. Then the counterattack came. Kinetic rounds accelerated beyond comprehension, slicing through hulls like knives through paper. Rail guns ignited with silent, merciless fire, piercing vessel after vessel. Entire squadrons of Dominion cruisers were obliterated in moments, their fragments tumbling like deadly confetti. The Velarans watching from orbit could scarcely believe their eyes. What had been a hopeless situation moments before had turned into a display of raw, terrifying power. In the command hub of the Velaran orbital station, technicians whispered in disbelief. "They're not even moving individually," one said. "They operate as a single organism, every attack, every maneuver perfectly coordinated." High Chancellor Saravel held her gaze on the holoscreen, her breath shallow. "They fight as one mind," she murmured almost to herself. "They are perfect predators." The Kier Dominion, for all their pride and history of conquest, had never encountered such efficiency. Their weapons tore into the human fleet, yet for every ship destroyed, 10 Dominion vessels were obliterated in return. The Dreadnoughts moved with relentless discipline, cutting paths through the attackers and leaving the system's orbit littered with wreckage. On the surface, Velaran citizens emerged from their shelters, their fear mingled with awe. They saw the streaks of destruction in the sky, the falling debris of the Dominion's finest ships. Children pointed upward, asking questions adults could barely answer. Soldiers, once trembling at the thought of Kier boarding parties, now felt a strange sense of safety under the shadow of these massive alien vessels. Still, the battle was far from over. The Dominion rallied their remaining ships, concentrating fire on the lead dreadnought attempting to break the formation. Energy arcs lanced through space, each explosion a beacon of destruction. Yet the humans adjusted instantly, shields reinforcing at weak points, counterfire redirected with frightening speed. The Dominion's commanders, shouting orders to maintain their formations, found their plans unraveling before their eyes. In the aftermath of the first wave, the Velarans glimpsed the scale of the humans' true capabilities. Their dreadnoughts did not simply destroy. They immobilized, contained, and neutralized. Dozens of Dominion vessels were left drifting, inert and powerless, while the humans advanced, inexorably, clearing paths and securing zones of control. Even survivors from the Kier fleet began to notice the discipline, the ruthless efficiency that defined the newcomers. They spoke in hushed tones over open channels, warning one another of the legends made real. "These are Deathworlders," one whispered. "The archives were not exaggerating. We are outmatched." For the first time in their history, the Dominion fleet faced a reality in which numbers did not guarantee victory. The humans' tactical genius, combined with superior firepower, shattered the Dominion's confidence. Their advance slowed, and their attacks became hesitant, uncertain. Fear had entered a species that had known only conquest. High above, the Velarans began to hope. The first real defense of Velara IX had arrived, not in timid fleets or hesitant reinforcements, but in the form of beings whose power dwarfed anything the galaxy had seen. Humanity had not only answered the SOS, they had brought judgment and salvation together, and the Dominion, for all its might, could not stand against it. As the battle continued, Saravel turned to her aides, her voice steady but trembling with relief. "Tell the people, the humans are here to save us. They are not just warriors, they are our shield." In the heavens, the dreadnoughts advanced in unison, a tide of power and precision that the Dominion could neither match nor escape. By the end of the day, countless Dominion ships had been reduced to drifting hulks. And as night fell over Velara IX, for the first time in weeks, the cities were quiet, not with death but with hope. The humans had arrived, they had fought, and the galaxy had begun to realize that the legends of the Deathworlders were true. The battle had subsided, leaving the Velara system scattered with drifting wreckage. Where the Kier Dominion had once held dominance, now there was silence, punctuated only by the hum of human dreadnoughts maintaining formation. The Velarans stared in awe from orbiting stations and ruined cities below, their hope tempered with disbelief. They had survived. Against overwhelming odds, the Deathworlders had delivered them salvation. It was not long before the first message arrived. The holoprojector in the council chamber flickered to life, displaying a figure clad in the stark uniform of the Terran Union. The human commander's expression was calm, composed, and entirely unreadable. "This is the Terran Union," the figure said, voice clear and authoritative. "We received your distress signal. Velara IX is under our protection until the Kier threat is eliminated." The council members stared at one another, mouths open. A mixture of relief and unease filled the room. The humans did not ask for permission. They did not apologize for their intervention. They simply stated the fact: the planet was theirs to safeguard. Counselor Leorin, still pale from the earlier battle, finally found his voice. You will stay here. You do not demand anything in return." The human commander's gaze swept across the chamber, almost as if weighing the question itself. "We do not take what is not offered. We do not negotiate with those who threaten others. Valera IX has called for help. We respond. That is all." High Chancellor Saravel exhaled, trying to steady herself. Relief was immediate, yet so was the weight of responsibility. The humans were not just saviors, they were now active participants in Valera's affairs. "They want access to our planetary defense grid," Curine murmured, eyes scanning the reports streaming in from orbit. "Every orbital cannon, every shield array, they are taking control." Saravel nodded slowly. "They must coordinate. They have the capability to manage the system more efficiently than we ever could, especially after this battle. Resistance would be unwise." Outside, human dreadnoughts adjusted their positions. Orbital stations were scanned, defenses synchronized, and evacuation corridors monitored. Every action was precise, methodical, executed without hesitation. The Velarans could only watch, realizing that they were no longer in control of their own fate. But in the presence of beings whose discipline and power were undeniable, it was a comfort rather than a threat. The Kier Dominion, battered and stunned, had retreated to the far edges of the system. Their pride, once unbreakable, had been shattered. Scattered patrols fled, carrying word of the humans' overwhelming strength. Even the most seasoned Kier admirals could not account for the scale, the coordination, and the ruthlessness of the Deathworlders' attack. On Valera IX, citizens gathered wherever they could see the human fleet. Children pressed their faces against window panes, elders whispered legends remembered from old archives, and soldiers who had faced certain death now dared to smile. For the first time in weeks, fear had been replaced with awe and gratitude. In the council chamber, Saravel addressed her aides. "Prepare a formal welcome. They deserve recognition even if we do not fully understand them. And ensure our people know they are here to help, not to conquer." Counselor Marat, who had spent decades warning against the unpredictable nature of the Deathworlders, now allowed a small nod. "Perhaps the legends were incomplete. They are dangerous, yes, but they may also be our salvation." As the day faded, communication lines between Valera IX and the human fleet opened fully. Strategists and engineers exchanged data, refining the planetary defense systems. The humans did not boast, did not demand accolades. They simply integrated, coordinating every station and orbital battery as though the system had always been theirs to protect. Saravel watched the holoscreen, her thoughts a mixture of relief and unease. Humanity had arrived, not as conquerors, not as mercenaries, but as an unstoppable force of protection. Their presence changed everything. Trade, diplomacy, security. It was impossible to measure the full impact yet. And then the final confirmation came from orbit. The last Dominion patrols had been neutralized. Valera IX was no longer under immediate threat. The human fleet maintained a vigilant watch, their dreadnoughts positioned strategically across the system. "They are not asking anything," Saravel whispered to herself, finally allowing herself a smile. "They fight because it is what they do. They protect because they can." For the first time, the Velarans understood the true meaning of the legends. The Deathworlders had heard their call. They had come. And humanity was not here to destroy, they were here to ensure survival. But as the council celebrated quietly, a shadow of understanding crossed Saravel's mind. The galaxy had changed. Valera IX was safe today, but with humans in the skis, the rules of power had shifted forever. The Terran Union had arrived. The age of humanity had begun. For a brief moment, Valera IX seemed at peace. The fires had dimmed, the cities were no longer shaken by bombardment, and the people dared to step into the streets. But tranquility is rarely permanent in a galaxy that worships conquest. The Kier Dominion had fled, but not defeated. From the far edges of the system, enormous war fleets regrouped, their numbers swelling as reinforcements poured in from neighboring sectors. Reports came quickly to the human fleet. "Multiple incoming formations," a Velaran officer said, disbelief written across his face. "They are larger than before, far larger." The human commanders did not flinch. Their dreadnoughts adjusted orbit, forming layered defensive perimeters that were precise, symmetrical, and unyielding. Automated drones and weapon platforms deployed instantly, forming grids of firepower that even the Dominion could not ignore. In the council chamber, Saravel watched the displays with bated breath. "They're coming back," she said, her voice tense but calm. "And humanity, they are ready." The Kier fleets arrived as a living storm, tens of thousands of vessels cutting through the void. Their assault was designed to overwhelm, to crush the humans with sheer numbers. They fired upon the outermost dreadnoughts, energy beams lancing through space in deadly arcs. For a moment, it seemed as if the Dominion might succeed in breaking the human lines. Then the counterstrike began. Dreadnoughts fired in perfect synchrony. Massive kinetic projectiles ripped through Dominion squadrons, obliterating formations with a speed and precision that defied comprehension. Energy lances sliced through vessels with silent devastation, leaving trails of burning debris in their wake. Automated war drones swarmed the remaining ships, disabling engines and weapons before a single human crew member needed to act. Velarans in orbit could hardly comprehend what they were witnessing. Entire fleets were annihilated before they could even coordinate attacks. The humans did not merely fight, they dominated, choreographing the battlefield with an intelligence and ruthlessness that seemed almost unnatural. The Kier admirals shouted orders, but their commands were futile. Their forces were corralled, funneled into kill zones where dreadnoughts waited patiently, then struck with overwhelming force. The Dominion had faced fierce opponents before, but never one that combined overwhelming power with tactical genius so completely. On the surface, Velera's citizens could hear the distant hum of energy discharges, see streaks of light in the sky, and feel tremors from orbital explosions. Yet fear was no longer their dominant emotion. Instead, awe and relief took its place. Their planet had been saved not by luck, not by negotiation, but by beings who existed on a level far above anything previously imagined. Even the Kier survivors began to understand the truth. Communications intercepted by the human fleet revealed their growing dread. "These are not merely warriors," a Kier officer transmitted. "They are predators, apex predators. Nothing we have can withstand them." The humans did not stop after the Dominion's advance faltered. Their fleets pressed forward, securing the outer edges of the Velera system. Entire Kier battalions were neutralized without mercy, yet the humans showed restraint where necessary, disabling vessels rather than destroying them outright when possible. Their goal was clear: eliminate the threat, protect Velera, and assert control over the battle, not to exterminate for sport. By the end of the engagement, the Kier had suffered losses so catastrophic that retreat was the only option. The survivors fled into distant space, nursing their pride and resources, but knowing the humans could strike again at any time. Even the most seasoned Kier commanders whispered the words none had dared before: the Deathworlders were unbeatable. In the council chamber, Saravel allowed herself a rare smile. "They have done it again," she said. "They protected us. They destroyed the threat entirely this time." Councillor Marat, who had spent a lifetime warning of the dangers of summoning the Deathworlders, nodded slowly. "It seems the legends only told part of the story. They are dangerous, yes, but they are also necessary." Human commanders transmitted their final words before departing orbit temporarily. "Velera IX is secure. Continue to reinforce your planetary defenses. We will return if required. Remember, the Dominion will not forget, and neither shall we." As they departed into deep space, the Velarans understood something fundamental. The galaxy had changed forever. Humanity's presence in the stars was no longer a legend whispered among historians. It was an undeniable, unstoppable reality. Their fleet, their strategy, their precision and might had altered the balance of power, ensuring that Velera IX and any world under their protection would survive where none could have before. For the first time in generations, the people of Velera could hope, not only for survival, but for a future under guardians who were beyond anything the galaxy had ever imagined. The battle was over, but the skies above Velera IX remained alive with silent activity. Human dreadnoughts drifted in orbit, their engines humming faintly as they maintained a vigilant watch. The Dominion had retreated, scattered, and broken, yet the aftermath of the war lingered like a shadow over the planet. Cities were scarred, defenses shattered, and the people who survived carried the memory of fire and fear in their eyes. Chancellor Saravel walked through the council chambers, her thoughts heavy with both gratitude and unease. Humanity had saved Velera IX, had annihilated a foe that even the strongest Velaran fleets could not touch. Yet their arrival had changed everything. Their ships, their weapons, their very presence were beyond comprehension. They were saviors, yes, but also a force that could never be ignored, a power that had subtly reshaped the balance of authority in the system. Outside the council chamber, the first human landing crafts descended. They were massive, though graceful, lowering squads of disciplined soldiers to coordinate reconstruction and stabilization efforts. They did not demand ceremony or tribute, but their presence was imposing, an unspoken reminder that the galaxy had grown larger and more dangerous than Velera IX had ever imagined. High-ranking Velaran officers met with the human commanders in the city's central plaza. Discussions of logistics, fortifications, and repair schedules dominated the morning. Yet beneath the technical conversation ran a quiet undercurrent of tension. The humans were not asking permission, they were integrating. They were reorganizing defenses, rerouting power grids, and taking control of orbital batteries. It was not conquest in the traditional sense, but the effect was similar. Velera IX was no longer entirely under Velaran control. Councillor Currine, who had survived both the battles and the terror of the Dominion assault, whispered to Saravel as they watched the humans coordinate a vast fleet of drones. "They are efficient beyond belief. We could never have done this ourselves. And yet," his voice trailed off, the unspoken question hanging in the air. "They are here to protect," Saravel replied quietly. "For now, that is enough, but yes, their presence changes everything." On the streets, the citizens were learning similar lessons. Children watched human engineers operate massive repair machines with a calm authority that inspired awe. Farmers and traders spoke in hushed tones about the legends of Deathworlders, now fully realized. Soldiers who had once trembled at the Dominion's approach now found a strange sense of pride under the shadow of their new guardians. Humanity's methods were foreign, their discipline uncompromising, but for the first time in years, Velera IX had a future. Yet the price of that survival was undeniable. The humans were not here to negotiate culture or politics. Their presence would shape trade, defense, and even the hierarchy of power across the system. Velarans understood that their world's safety had come with a subtle shift. They were under the guardianship of a force beyond their full understanding, and any mistake or misstep could draw attention or retribution from these Deathworlders. In the evenings, Saravel walked along the central plaza, observing the humans working alongside Velaran citizens. She saw collaboration, efficiency, and restraint. Yet the size and strength of their fleet remained an ever-present reminder. Humanity was absolute in power, and they had chosen to use that power to protect, not destroy. Marat, once fearful of summoning the Deathworlders, had begun to speak differently in council. "Perhaps the legends were incomplete," he said, watching a human dreadnought float silently in orbit above the planet. "They are dangerous, yes, but necessary. More than that, they are guardians. I had feared ruin. Instead, we have salvation." The city began to rebuild under human guidance. Walls were reinforced, infrastructure restored, and defenses upgraded with technology the Velarans could scarcely comprehend. Even as life resumed, there was a shared understanding. The galaxy had shifted. With humans watching from above, the Dominion and other hostile civilizations would think twice before targeting Velera IX again. As night fell, Saravel gazed toward the stars where the Dreadnoughts rested in quiet vigil. Their lights shimmered like distant constellations, symbols of protection and power. She whispered to herself, a mix of relief and recognition in her tone. "We are safe because they are here, and yet the galaxy has changed forever." Velera IX would survive. The Dominion had been defeated, but the presence of humanity, the Deathworlders who had answered their call, had altered the very nature of survival. For the Velarans, the cost of life was no longer only the Dominion. They were now part of a larger story, one in which human power and vigilance would shape their destiny. For the first time, the people of Velera understood that survival had a price, but perhaps it was a price worth paying. The Velera system was quiet at last. The fires of war had faded, leaving a scarred but resilient planet beneath the watchful gaze of human dreadnoughts. Orbital stations glimmered with activity, coordinated precisely by human strategists who moved with efficiency that the Velarans could scarcely imagine. The Kier Dominion had vanished beyond the system, battered and humbled, leaving behind only a warning. The Deathworlders were not to be trifled with. Velera IX itself was slowly recovering. Streets once buried under rubble now showed signs of rebuilding. Markets reopened, and families emerged from shelters to reclaim a semblance of normal life. Children ran through plazas, pointing toward the stars where human ships hung in silent vigil, symbols of both protection and overwhelming power. In the council chamber, Chancellor Saravel convened her advisors. The mood was lighter than it had been for weeks, but seriousness remained. The humans had saved Velara IX, but their arrival had altered the very rules of existence in the system. Authority, strategy, and defense were no longer solely Velaran concerns. Humanity's presence reshaped the balance of power. Counselor Curran spoke first, his eyes tracing the streams of human data displayed on the holoscreens. They have not demanded tribute or allegiance, yet their influence is absolute. The planet's defenses, its infrastructure, even the way we coordinate our fleets, everything has changed. Marat, who had once feared the Deathworlders' arrival, now nodded slowly. And yet, for the first time, I feel secure. The Dominion or any other threat will think twice before approaching. Survival is no longer uncertain. High above, human dreadnoughts continued their watch, their immense frames drifting silently in orbit. Ships smaller than cities scuttled between them, maintaining equipment, reinforcing shields, and coordinating patrols across the system. Humanity's reach was methodical and complete, ensuring that no enemy could breach Velara's defenses without immediate and overwhelming retaliation. The humans themselves had begun limited interaction with Velaran leaders. They offered guidance rather than orders, assistance rather than oversight. Engineering teams worked alongside Velaran technicians, repairing orbital arrays and restoring power grids. Military liaisons shared tactics that had shattered the Dominion fleets, instructing Velaran soldiers on strategies they would never have imagined on their own. Yet even as cooperation flourished, a quiet tension persisted. The Velarans understood that they were under the protection of beings whose power dwarfed anything in the galaxy. Every move, every decision, carried weight because the humans' presence was absolute. They were saviors, yes, but also arbiters of a new era in which survival no longer depended on Velaran might alone. On the streets, whispers began to spread. Stories of the Deathworlders, once half-forgotten legends, were now real. Children asked about their new guardians in schools, and elders recounted old tales, now validated by reality. The people were learning that power could be wielded for protection, that survival was sometimes dependent on beings far stronger than themselves, yet capable of mercy and discipline. Beyond the planet, signals from neighboring systems began to reach Velara IX. Other civilizations, aware of the humans' decisive victory, were sending inquiries and distress calls. The galaxy was watching, realizing that the Terran Union, the Deathworlders, were no longer myths but a central force in galactic affairs. In the council chamber, Saravel gazed out at the stars, her thoughts distant. "We have survived," she said softly. "Not by ourselves, but because they answered our call. The galaxy will never be the same, and neither will we." Marat placed a hand on her shoulder. "The legends were true in part. They are dangerous, yes, but they are also necessary. And more than that, they are guardians. We owe them our survival." As night fell over Velara IX, human dreadnoughts rotated in orbit, their shields faintly shimmering against the void. Each light was a silent promise, a sentinel against the threats that lurked beyond the known stars. Humanity had arrived not merely to fight, but to reshape the galaxy's understanding of strength, strategy, and survival. The Council, the citizens, and the survivors of war all understood the truth. The galaxy had entered a new era. Velara IX was safe, but safety came from the presence of a species whose very existence redefined what it meant to survive. The Dominion had learned, and the rest of the galaxy would soon understand. The Deathworlders, called human, were now the ultimate arbiters of life and power among the stars. And above all, the people of Velara IX could look to the heavens and know that, in the shadow of humanity's dreadnoughts, the future was no longer uncertain. They were watched, protected, and forever changed. The age of humanity had begun.